Hello. You're watching Global English Stories, where stories come to life and help you learn English naturally. Listen, enjoy, and start your learning journey.
Introduction. Let's dive into the life of a man who changed how we see the universe, Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein is one of the most famous scientists in history. His ideas changed how we understand the world and the universe. But Einstein was more than just a brilliant mind. He was a curious child, a thoughtful student, and a person who faced many challenges. His story shows how creativity, hard work, and a love for asking questions can lead to great discoveries. From his early years in Germany to becoming a world-renowned physicist, Einstein's life was full of interesting events and important moments. He not only changed science, but also spoke out about peace, fairness, and the future of humanity. This story will take you through his journey, showing the man behind the genius and the lasting impact he left on the world. Part 1. Young Einstein. Albert Einstein was born on March 14, 1879, in the city of Ulm, in the Kingdom of Württemberg, which was part of the German Empire. His parents, Hermann and Pauline Einstein, were not scientists or famous people. Hermann ran a small business that sold electrical equipment, and Pauline loved to play the piano. Their home was calm and warm, and they valued learning, music, and hard work. From the very beginning, Albert showed signs that he was different from other children. As a baby, Albert was slow to speak. His parents even worried something might be wrong. But slowly he began to talk, and once he did, he never stopped asking questions. He was curious about everything. He wanted to understand how things worked, clocks, magnets, and even invisible forces. When he was around 5 years old, his father gave him a compass. Young Albert was amazed that the needle always pointed in the same direction. He wondered what invisible power was guiding it. That simple gift sparked a deep interest in science that never faded. School, however, was not easy for Albert. The classrooms were strict, and teachers expected students to memorize facts and follow rules without asking questions. But Albert wanted to know why. He didn't like being told what to think. Because of this, some teachers thought he was a troublemaker or lazy. But in truth, he was thinking in a different way. He read books on his own, especially about math and science. He loved solving puzzles and thinking about big ideas. He taught himself algebra and geometry before most kids even learned basic arithmetic. When Albert was still a boy, his family moved to Munich, where his father started a new electrical business. The move brought both opportunities and challenges. In Munich, Albert entered a new school, the Luitpold Gymnasium. The education system there was still strict and focused on obedience. Albert did well in subjects he liked, such as math and science, but he struggled with others, especially languages. Teachers misunderstood him. They didn't see a future genius in their classroom, only a quiet, stubborn boy who didn't fit in. At home, Albert found comfort in music. He learned to play the violin, a skill encouraged by his mother. He enjoyed playing pieces by Mozart and Beethoven. Music gave him peace and allowed his mind to wander. It also helped him think. Later in life, he would say that some of his best ideas came while he was playing music. Albert's curiosity didn't stop at school or home. He spent hours reading books that explained the world in new ways. One book that deeply inspired him was a simple geometry book, which he called his sacred little geometry book. It showed him that clear rules and logical steps could lead to great truths. This helped shape his love for mathematics and logical thinking. Despite his growing interest in science, Albert faced problems. At age 15, his father's business failed, and the family moved to Italy to find better opportunities. Albert stayed behind in Munich to finish school, but he felt lonely and unhappy. Eventually, he left school without telling anyone and joined his family in Italy. This decision could have ended his education, but Einstein was determined. He applied to the Swiss Federal Polytechnic School in Zurich, hoping to become a teacher of math and physics. He was only 16 and didn't meet all the requirements, but he passed the math and science parts of the entrance exam with high scores. Though he failed in other subjects like language and history, The school saw his talent and invited him to attend high school in Aarau, Switzerland. This new school was very different. The teachers were kind, and students were encouraged to think freely. Albert felt happy and motivated again. He even began to dream of changing the world with his ideas. In Aarau, he stayed with a family who welcomed him warmly. He observed the clock tower near their home and began thinking about how time worked, a thought that would become very important later. His time in Aarau helped him grow as a person and a thinker. He completed high school and entered the Polytechnic School in 1896. At this point, Albert had no idea he would become one of the most important scientists in history. He was still a young man with big questions, a love for math and science, and a mind that worked in unique ways. But the foundation was being laid for the theories that would one day change how we understand the universe. In these early years, we see the heart of Einstein's story, a boy full of wonder, facing challenges but never giving up. He did not shine in traditional ways, but his inner world was full of ideas waiting to grow. Even when misunderstood, Albert stayed true to his way of thinking. These qualities, curiosity, independence, and a strong will, would guide him through the rest of his extraordinary life. Part 2. The Student Who Thought Differently. Albert Einstein began his studies at the Swiss Federal Polytechnic School in Zurich in 1896. He was just 17 years old, one of the youngest in his class. The school was famous for science and engineering, and Albert hoped to become a teacher of mathematics and physics. But his journey as a student was not always smooth. He was not the top of his class, and his habits were quite unusual. He often skipped lectures and studied what interested him most, rather than following the curriculum. Einstein's teachers were serious and traditional. They expected students to memorize and repeat ideas. But Albert had his own way of learning. He liked to think deeply and ask new questions. He often read advanced books outside of class and discussed ideas with friends. One of his closest friends was Marcel Grossman, a hardworking and organized student. Grossman helped Einstein by sharing class notes and encouraging him to stay on track. Without this help, Einstein might have failed some courses. Even though Albert didn't do well in all his subjects, he stood out in math and physics. He loved solving problems and thinking about how light, time, and energy worked. He also studied on his own, reading the works of famous scientists like James Clerk Maxwell, who had developed important theories about electricity and magnetism. Einstein was not just a student, he was already thinking like a scientist. After finishing his studies in 1900, Einstein hoped to get a job as a university assistant. But none of his professors wanted to recommend him. They thought he was too independent and hard to control. As a result, he struggled to find work. For 2 years, he took temporary teaching jobs and lived with little money. He even considered changing careers. Then, in 1902, a friend helped him get a job at the Swiss Patent Office in Bern. There, Albert examined new inventions and checked whether they could be approved for patents. The work was not exciting, but it gave him free time to think and write. In many ways, this quiet job was perfect. Without pressure from universities or bosses, Einstein could follow his thoughts wherever they led. During this time, Albert began to develop ideas that would later become some of the most important scientific theories in history. He often talked with a small group of friends, including mathematician Michel Besso. They called themselves the Olympia Academy. The group met at cafes or in Einstein's apartment to discuss books, science, and philosophy. These conversations helped Einstein sharpen his thinking. Even as a young man, Einstein questioned things that others accepted as facts. For example, he didn't believe time was fixed and the same for everyone. He wondered what would happen if someone could ride on a beam of light. Would time stop? Could space and time be connected? These strange but exciting thoughts pushed him to explore new scientific ideas. At the same time, Albert was also dealing with changes in his personal life. He had fallen in love with a fellow student, Maliva Merrick. She was one of the few women studying physics at the time. The two shared a love for science, and they began writing letters full of ideas, jokes, and dreams. In 1902, before they married, Maliva gave birth to a daughter named Liesel, but very little is known about the child's life. Later, Albert and Maliva married and had two more sons, Hans Albert and Eduard. Einstein worked hard during these years. He was a new husband, a young father, and a scientist with big dreams. In his free time, he wrote scientific papers and submitted them to journals. He had no lab, no students, and no title. But what he had was a mind that refused to stop asking questions. In 1905, while still working at the patent office, Einstein published 4 papers in a science journal called Annal der Physik. This year would later be known as his miracle year. One paper explained the photoelectric effect, showing how light can knock electrons off metal, a key idea that would later lead to modern electronics. Another paper introduced his special theory of relativity, which changed how scientists understood space and time. Yet another paper described how to measure the size of atoms, helping prove that atoms actually existed. At the time, very few people noticed these papers. Einstein was still unknown, but those who read his work were amazed. His ideas were bold, creative, and backed by strong logic. Slowly, his name began to spread in the world of science. Even though he didn't yet hold a university position, Einstein had become a serious thinker. He had shown that deep ideas could come from outside the classroom, from a man working at a patent office, studying by night, and dreaming by day. His life was proof that you don't need special titles or expensive labs to change the world. All you need is a curious mind and the courage to think differently. By the end of this chapter in his life, Albert Einstein was ready for the next stage. He had proven himself as a scientist and was beginning to gain respect. The world had not yet fully recognized his genius, but it wouldn't take long. His journey from an average student to a thinker with revolutionary ideas reminds us that true understanding begins when we dare to ask new questions, even if no one else is asking them. Part 3. The Miracle Year. The year 1905 changed Albert Einstein's life and the world of science forever. This year is now called his Annus Mirabilis, or Miracle Year. While working full-time at the Swiss Patent Office, Einstein published 4 scientific papers that would transform physics. These papers didn't just answer questions. They opened doors to new ways of thinking. Einstein had no laboratory, no title, and no academic job. But what he had was a quiet room, a strong mind, and the freedom to think deeply. After finishing his office work each day, he returned home and worked into the night. His notebooks filled with strange questions about light, time, and matter. The first of his famous papers explained the photoelectric effect. Scientists had noticed that shining light on a metal surface could knock electrons off the metal, but they didn't understand why. According to classical physics, the light's energy should spread out evenly and only work if it was intense enough. But experiments showed something different. Even weak light could produce the effect if its frequency was high enough. Einstein made a bold suggestion. He said light was not just a wave, as scientists believed. Instead, it could also behave like a stream of tiny particles or quanta, later called photons. This was a completely new idea, and it helped start the development of quantum physics. Many scientists didn't accept it at first, but this idea would later win Einstein the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1921. In his second paper, Einstein studied the movement of small particles in liquid, called Brownian motion. This motion had been observed for years, but no one could fully explain it. Einstein used mathematics to show that the movement was caused by the constant motion of invisible atoms and molecules. His work helped prove that atoms were real and not just theoretical ideas. This paper gave strong support to atomic theory and changed how scientists study matter. Then came his third paper, perhaps the most famous one of all. It was called On the Electrodynamics of Moving Bodies, and it introduced what we now call the special theory of relativity. This paper asked a strange question. What happens when two people move at different speeds? Do they experience time the same way? Einstein said no. According to his theory, Time and space are not fixed. They change depending on how fast you are moving. A person moving near the speed of light would experience time more slowly than someone who is standing still. This idea was shocking. For centuries, people have believed time was the same for everyone. But Einstein showed that time could stretch and space could bend. This theory also removed the idea of absolute rest. In other words, there was no special place in the universe that could be called perfectly still. Everything is always moving in relation to something else. These ideas were hard to believe, but Einstein's mathematics was strong, and his logic was clear. Finally, his fourth paper was short but powerful. It introduced a small equation that would become the most famous in science. E equals mc squared. This formula means that energy, E, and mass, m, are connected. The c stand for the speed of light, which is a very large number. So even a tiny amount of mass can become a huge amount of energy. This idea was new, and it would later become important in nuclear energy and the development of atomic bombs. At the time, few people understood what Einstein had done. His papers were published in a respected journal, but he was still an unknown man working in a quiet office. Slowly, however, scientists began to notice. Some of them wrote letters praising his ideas. Others had questions. But one thing was clear. Einstein had opened a new chapter in science. After 1905, Albert Einstein was no longer just a patent clerk. He became known as a serious scientist. Universities began to take interest. In 1908, he finally got a teaching position at the University of Bern. From there, he moved to Zurich, then Prague, and later back to Zurich again. His career had begun to rise. Einstein himself remained modest. He once said, "I have no special talents. I'm only passionately curious." But curiosity, combined with deep thought and courage, had made him a rising star in the world of science. The miracle year was not just a time of success. It was the beginning of a revolution. Physics would never be the same again. For hundreds of years, Newton's laws had guided science. Einstein respected Newton, but saw beyond him. He showed that space and time could behave in strange and beautiful ways. These ideas were not just for scientists. They also changed how people saw the universe. They made people wonder, what is time? What is reality? Can we ever fully understand the world? In later years, Einstein's theories would be tested and proven correct. Clocks on fast-moving airplanes were shown to tick more slowly. Atomic energy proved that mass could indeed turn into energy. And the study of light as both wave and particle became the foundation of quantum physics. But it all began in one year, in one small apartment, with one curious man. The miracle year of 1905 was not just about science. It was about the power of imagination. Einstein showed that great ideas could come from simple questions and that even the quietest thinker could change the world. Part 4. Fame, Family, and World Problems. After his miracle year in 1905, Albert Einstein's life began to change quickly. Scientists started paying attention to the young man who worked at the patent office. Over the next few years, Einstein became a professor, moved through different cities, and continued publishing important scientific work. By the early 1910s, he was well known in the academic world. But true fame came a bit later when the whole world started talking about his ideas. In 1915, Einstein completed his most important work, the general theory of relativity. This theory went beyond his earlier ideas about special relativity. It explained how gravity works, not as a force, as Isaac Newton had said, but as a curve in space and time. According to Einstein, massive objects like stars and planets bend the space around them. This bending is what we feel as gravity. The theory was complex and not everyone understood it. But in 1919, something happened that brought Einstein's name to every newspaper. That year, British scientists observed a solar eclipse. During the eclipse, they measured how the light from distant stars bent around the sun, just as Einstein's theory had predicted. When their findings were announced, Einstein became a global celebrity overnight. Newspapers around the world ran headlines like, "Lights all askew in the heavens and Einstein's theory triumphs." Suddenly, this quiet, thoughtful man with wild hair became a household name. People who had never studied physics were now talking about curved space and the speed of light. Fame, however, came with its own challenges. Einstein never enjoyed being in the spotlight. He preferred quiet thinking to public speaking. Still, he used his fame for good. He began to speak out about issues that mattered to him, including war, peace, and human rights. World War I had left deep scars across Europe. Einstein, who hated violence, was deeply saddened by the war's destruction. While many scientists supported their governments during the war, Einstein stood for peace. He signed letters and gave talks against the use of weapons and violence. His strong beliefs made him both respected and criticized. At the same time, Einstein's personal life was going through major changes. His first marriage, to Mileva Merrick, had grown difficult. They had two sons, Hans and Eduard, but their relationship became strained. In 1919, Einstein and Mileva divorced. Soon after, he married his cousin, Elsa Lowenthal, who supported him as a partner and helped manage his growing fame. His children, especially Eduard, continued to be a source of worry. Eduard was highly intelligent, but struggled with mental illness. This deeply affected Einstein, who tried to help but often felt helpless. Though he loved his sons, his busy life and career made it difficult to stay close. Despite the troubles at home, Einstein kept working. In the 1920s, he traveled the world, giving lectures in Europe, the United States, Asia, and the Middle East. Everywhere he went, large crowds came to hear him speak. People saw him not just as a scientist, but as a symbol of wisdom and peace. Einstein also continued to explore big questions in science. He worked on a dream called the unified field theory, trying to bring together the forces of nature, gravity, electricity, and magnetism into one single theory. He hoped to find a deeper truth about the universe, but the answer remained out of reach. Meanwhile, the world around him was changing fast. In Germany, where Einstein lived and worked, political tensions were rising. The Nazi Party was gaining power, and anti-Jewish hatred was spreading. Einstein, who was Jewish, saw the danger clearly. He began speaking out against the Nazis and warned others about the threat they posed. He also stood up for fellow scientists who were attacked or pushed out of their jobs. He helped many escape from Germany, writing letters and offering support. But even as he helped others, he knew he might need to leave himself. In 1933, Adolf Hitler came to power in Germany. That same year, Einstein was visiting the United States. He quickly decided not to return to Germany. His books were burned, his home was searched, and he was called an enemy of the state. It was clear that staying would be dangerous. Einstein accepted a job at the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, New Jersey. He would spend the rest of his life in the United States. But leaving Germany was not easy. It meant giving up his homeland and starting a new chapter in exile. Even as a refugee, Einstein never stayed silent. He spoke out against racism in America, supported civil rights, and remained a strong voice for peace. He was more than a physicist now. He was a global thinker. Einstein's fame had given him a platform. He used it not for personal gain, but to fight for justice and truth. Whether it was helping scientists escape Nazi Germany or standing up against war, Einstein tried to live by the values he believed in. But fame also had its limits. People expected him to have answers for everything, from science to politics to religion. Einstein often said that people gave him too much credit. He once joked, "To punish me for my contempt of authority, fate made me an authority myself." By the end of the 1930s, Einstein had become more than just a scientist. He had become a symbol. People around the world saw him as a genius, a humanist, and a guide in difficult times. Yet behind the fame was still the same man, curious, kind, and always searching for deeper understanding. His rise to fame had begun with quiet nights of thinking and questions that no one else dared to ask. Now, as the world faced new dangers, Einstein's voice grew louder, not just in science, but in the search for a better future. Part 5. A Scientist in Exile. When Albert Einstein left Germany in 1933, it wasn't just a change in location. It was the beginning of a new life in exile. He moved to the United States to escape the Nazi regime, settling in Princeton, New Jersey, where he joined the Institute for Advanced Study. Though safe from the growing danger in Europe, Einstein carried the weight of the world's troubles with him. Princeton was quiet and peaceful. Einstein liked to walk through the town in his old clothes, often without socks, and chat with neighbors and students. But behind this simple lifestyle was a deep concern for what was happening back in Europe. The Nazis had taken control of Germany, and war was coming. Einstein, a pacifist who had always spoken against violence, now faced a difficult decision. In 1939, scientists learned that Germany might be trying to build a powerful new weapon, an atomic bomb. Though Einstein was no longer working in physics directly related to nuclear energy, his famous equation, E equals mc squared, showed how energy could come from matter. This idea was at the heart of the new weapon. Two fellow scientists, Leo Szilard and Edward Teller, asked Einstein to help warn the U.S. government. Einstein wrote a letter to President Franklin D. Roosevelt, explaining the danger and urging the country to begin its own research. This letter led to the creation of the Manhattan Project, which eventually built the first atomic bombs. Einstein later said he regretted signing that letter. He hated war and never wanted his work to cause harm. He had acted only out of fear that the Nazis might get the bomb first. In the end, the United States used atomic bombs on Japan in 1945, bringing World War II to a close, but at a terrible cost. The destruction shocked Einstein. He spent the rest of his life speaking out against nuclear weapons. Even in exile, Einstein never stopped being active. He used his fame to raise money for Jewish refugees and helped many scientists escape from Europe. He also stood up for civil rights in the United States, calling racism a disease of white people and supporting the fight against segregation. Einstein was invited to speak at many events, and people listened to his words with great respect. But he didn't enjoy attention. He preferred quiet days of thinking, writing, and walking. He still worked on his idea of a unified field theory, trying to connect gravity and electromagnetism into one grand theory. Though he never succeeded, he remained passionate about it. He also enjoyed music and often played the violin. To him, music and science were both ways to find harmony and beauty in the world. He once said, "I often think in music. I live my daydreams in music. I see my life in terms of music." As the years passed, Einstein continued to receive awards and honors, but he cared little for medals or ceremonies. What mattered to him were truth, freedom, and kindness. He became a symbol of wisdom, someone the world looked to in times of trouble. In 1952, after the death of Israel's first president, Einstein was offered the position of President of Israel. It was a great honor, but he turned it down. He said he lacked the experience and skill for politics and preferred to remain a scientist and teacher. His later years were spent in reflection. He continued to write, not only about science, but also about peace, education, and human rights. He warned that science without compassion could be dangerous. He believed that people must care for each other and work together to solve problems. Einstein also spoke about religion and the universe. He didn't follow any one religion, but he believed in a deep, spiritual connection to the cosmos. He once said, "Science without religion is lame. Religion without science is blind." For him, science was a way to understand the order and beauty of the universe. By the early 1950s, Einstein's health began to decline. He had problems with his heart, but he continued working and thinking until the end. On April 17, 1955, he experienced internal bleeding caused by a burst artery. He refused surgery, saying he wanted to go naturally. Early the next morning, on April 18th, Albert Einstein passed away at the age of 76. Before he died, he had been working on a speech for a television appearance. The speech remained unfinished, just like his unified field theory. But Einstein's legacy was already complete in other ways. He had changed the world's understanding of time, space, energy, and gravity. He had shown how science could be both brilliant and human. His brain was removed during an autopsy and later studied by scientists, hoping to understand the secrets of his genius. Some pieces were kept in laboratories, others were shared among researchers. This decision was controversial, but it showed how deeply people wanted to know what made Einstein special. Einstein didn't want a grand funeral. He was cremated, and his ashes were scattered at a secret location. He believed that people should focus on ideas, not idols. In his words, gravitation is not responsible for people falling in love. Even in his final moments, his mind remained curious and full of wonder. Today, Albert Einstein's name stands for genius, curiosity, and the power of thought. From a quiet town in Princeton, his ideas reached every corner of the world. He was more than a scientist. He was a thinker, a dreamer, and a voice for peace in a troubled time. Einstein's exile was never just about leaving a country. It was about standing up for what was right, even when it was hard. He lived with courage, compassion, and a deep belief in the power of knowledge. In a world that often chooses fear, Einstein chose understanding. And because of that, his light still shines. Part 6. Echoes of Genius. Albert Einstein passed away in 1955, but his ideas continued to shape the world. His theories were not just lines in textbooks. They became the foundation of modern science. Even today, scientists build on his work to understand black holes, gravity, and the universe itself. But Einstein's legacy isn't only about science. It's about the power of thinking differently, standing up for peace, and staying curious. After his death, Einstein became more than a scientist. He became a symbol of genius. His image, wild hair, deep eyes, and gentle smile, appeared in books, posters, cartoons, and even toys. People from all over the world looked up to him. For many, Einstein was proof that one person could make a big difference just by using their mind. His theory of relativity changed how we see time and space. It helped scientists understand how the universe works, from the smallest atoms to the largest galaxies. Without Einstein's ideas, things like GPS, lasers, and parts of modern technology would not exist. But what amazed people most wasn't just what he discovered, it was how he thought. He once said, "Imagination is more important than knowledge." This idea inspired many to dream big and ask big questions. Einstein's work also opened the door to new fields of science. Quantum physics, which looks at how tiny particles behave, grew alongside his theories. He didn't always agree with where quantum theory was heading, especially because it seemed strange and full of uncertainty. He famously said, "God does not play dice with the universe." Still, he helped start the conversation and push scientists to explore further. In schools and universities, Einstein became a hero for students. He had struggled as a young boy, yet became the world's greatest scientist. This gave hope to many who felt different or unsure. His story taught people that it's okay to ask unusual questions and to see the world in your own way. Teachers often use Einstein's life to remind students that success comes from curiosity, not just perfect grades. Beyond science, Einstein left a deep impact on world thought. He spoke out for peace, equality, and human rights. He believed that science should help humanity, not hurt it. After World War II, he worked with other scientists to warn against nuclear weapons. He believed that if people didn't learn to live in peace, science could lead to great danger. Einstein also supported civil rights in the U.S., long before many others. He spoke at universities for black students and worked with civil rights leaders. He believed deeply in fairness and justice. To Einstein, science and ethics were connected. A smart mind without a kind heart was not enough. His writing continued to inspire people. Even in his letters and short essays, Einstein shared wisdom about life, happiness, and the universe. He said things like, "Life is like riding a bicycle. To keep your balance, you must keep moving." Simple words, but full of meaning. These thoughts help people not only learn science, but also learn how to live. Einstein's personal items, his notes, letters, and even his desk, were saved and studied. Museums displayed his belongings, and films and documentaries told his story. Princeton, the quiet town where he had lived, became a place of memory and respect. Visitors still walk by his home and wonder about the thoughts that filled its rooms. In later years, his name was given to many things: schools, awards, and scientific terms. The Einstein Prize honors work in physics. A genius is often called an Einstein. This shows how deeply his name entered everyday language. But perhaps the most powerful part of his legacy is the message he left behind, that anyone, from anywhere, can change the world with ideas. Einstein was not born into wealth or fame. He wasn't a perfect student. Yet, he became a voice for science and peace. He once said, "Try not to become a man of success, but rather try to become a man of value." And that's exactly what he did. Today, as scientists search for new planets, build space telescopes, and try to understand dark matter, they still use Einstein's work. His equations are written on blackboards in labs across the globe. His name appears in journals and research papers. But more than that, his spirit of questioning and wonder lives on in every curious mind. Even artists and writers talk about Einstein. He inspired poems, songs, and paintings. Some see him as a scientist, others as a dreamer. His life touched so many fields because he saw everything is connected: math, music, people, and the stars. As the world moves forward with AI, space travel, and powerful new tools, the need for Einstein's way of thinking becomes even more important. He showed that knowledge should serve good, and that wonder leads to discovery. Children in classrooms still hear his story. They see his face and smile at the man with messy hair and deep thoughts. Maybe one of them will be the next great thinker, dreamer, or peacemaker. That is the beauty of Einstein's legacy. It doesn't end. It grows with each new question and every curious child. Albert Einstein's genius was not just in his brain, but in his heart. He asked big questions, but never forgot the people around him. He loved truth, hated cruelty, and lived with courage. And in doing so, he gave the world more than just science. He gave hope. Albert Einstein's life shows us that curiosity and imagination can change the world. From a boy who struggled in school to a scientist who transformed how we understand the universe, his journey inspires millions. His ideas still shape technology and science today, while his message of peace and kindness reminds us what truly matters. Einstein's story encourages us to keep asking questions, think differently, and believe in the power of our own minds. Even now, his spirit lives on in every curious heart and every new discovery waiting to be made. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Keep learning, keep growing, and one story at a time.